Grandpa Ravi was a man who loved simple things. He had lived in the same neighborhood for more than 30 years. His house was not large or fancy, but it was filled with warmth, memories, and the smell of fresh tea that he brewed every morning. Behind his house stretched a calm little lake. The water reflected the sky like a mirror. Sometimes ducks glided across it, sometimes dragonflies hovered above it, and sometimes the air was so still that the surface of the lake looked like glass. For Ravi, this lake was more than just water. It was his place of peace. Fishing had always been his favorite activity. He had learned it as a boy from his father, who told him that fishing was not about the number of fish caught, but about patience, silence, and respect for nature. Over the years, Ravi had taken his old fishing rod to many rivers and ponds, but the small lake behind his house was his favorite spot. It was close, quiet, and full of memories. He would sit there for hours, letting the world slow down while he listened to the sound of water and birds. On a bright Saturday morning, Ravi prepared himself for another day at the lake. He wore his wide straw hat, carried his folding chair, and brought a small box with hooks and bait. The sun was soft and golden, touching the trees with light. A gentle breeze moved the leaves, and the air smelled fresh after the night's dew. Ravi smiled as he reached the edge of the lake. He set down his chair, fixed his fishing rod, and cast his line into the water. Ripples spread in circles, and he leaned back, enjoying the peace. For Ravi, fishing was not just about catching fish. Sometimes he caught nothing at all, yet he returned home with a calm mind and a happy heart. On that morning, he thought of his grandchildren who often came to visit him. They loved to sit by the lake with him and ask questions about fish, trees, and the old stories he told. He thought of his late wife, who used to bring him tea while he fished. These memories made him feel that the lake was part of his life, part of his family. But across the street lived Karen. She had moved into the neighborhood only 2 years ago. Karen was the head of the local HOA, a group that managed neighborhood rules. She liked being in charge and often told others what they should or should not do. Her garden had to be the neatest, her lawn the greenest, and her voice the loudest in meetings. She wanted control over every detail, and she disliked anything she could not manage. From her window, she noticed Ravi sitting at the lake with his rod. Her eyes narrowed. She believed the lake was only for decoration. In her view, it was there to look pretty, not to be used. She crossed her arms and shook her head. "This is not allowed," she muttered. "He is breaking the rules." It did not matter to Karen that Ravi had been fishing there long before she moved in. She did not ask whether the lake was part of his property. She did not care that he was quiet, harmless, and peaceful. To her, rules were rules, and she wanted them followed in her way. She picked up her phone and dialed. Within minutes, she was speaking to the local police, saying that someone was breaking community laws by fishing in the lake. Meanwhile, Ravi sat calmly, not knowing what was about to happen. A dragonfly landed on his rod, and he smiled at the small creature. The morning was perfect. Then, in the distance, he heard a siren. The sound grew louder. Birds flew from the trees. Ravi frowned. Sirens were rare in his quiet neighborhood. Soon a police car pulled up near the lake. 2 officers stepped out. They looked around before walking toward him. Ravi stood, surprised but polite. "Good morning, officers," he said kindly. "Sir, we received a call about unauthorized fishing," one officer explained. Ravi blinked. "Unauthorized? I have been fishing here for years. This lake is right behind my house. I have never harmed anyone." Before the officer could reply, Karen stormed out of her house. Her footsteps were sharp, her face stern. She pointed her finger straight at Ravi. "There he is," she declared. "He is breaking the rules. This lake is not for fishing. You must stop him right now." The officers exchanged glances. They were not sure how serious this matter was. One of them turned to Karen. "Ma'am, do you have the written rule about this?" Karen crossed her arms. "It is common sense. This is a community lake, and I am the head of the HOA. Fishing is not allowed." The other officer asked Ravi, "Sir, do you have proof that you can fish here?" Ravi sighed. He was not angry, but he felt a sting in his heart. "This land, including the lake behind my house, has belonged to me for more than 30 years. I have always fished here. Nobody has ever stopped me before." Still, the officers told him to pack up for now until they could confirm the rules with the HOA. They spoke politely, but the meaning was clear. Ravi nodded slowly. He packed his rod and chair, lifted them with steady hands, and walked back to his porch. Karen stood tall, feeling proud that she had won. That evening, Ravi sat in his rocking chair on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange. The lake shimmered with fading light. He held his cup of tea and thought about the day. He had never imagined being treated like a troublemaker for simply fishing. He was hurt, but more than that, he was thoughtful. Karen believed she had stopped him. She thought she had control. But Ravi had lived a long life. He had faced bigger problems than this, and he had learned the art of patience. If someone tried to take away his peace, he would not fight with anger. Instead, he would wait, watch, and find a way to show the truth. He thought about the law, about property rights, about the papers that clearly stated that the lake behind his house was part of his land. He thought about his neighbors, many of whom loved him and respected him. They often enjoyed the fish he caught. They knew his kindness and his patience. Ravi smiled faintly. He was not a man who rushed. Just as he waited quietly for a fish to bite, he would wait quietly for the right moment. He would not shout, he would not argue. He would show Karen and everyone else that the sweetest revenge was not loud. It was slow, calm, and undeniable. As the stars began to appear above the lake, Ravi sipped his tea and felt the old wisdom of his father's words. Patience always wins, and this time it would win again. The next morning, Grandpa Ravi rose before the sun. The memory of the police visit was still fresh in his mind, but he did not let it darken his spirit. He tied his old shoes, poured himself a cup of warm tea, and stepped out onto the porch. The lake behind his home shimmered faintly in the early light, as if nothing had happened the day before. Yet inside, Ravi knew that things had changed. Karen had crossed a line. She had not simply complained about noise or weeds in someone's yard. She had attacked the peace of a man who wanted nothing more than to sit quietly with his fishing rod. She had embarrassed him in front of neighbors and police, and she had done it with pride. Ravi was not a man of anger. He had lived too long, seen too much, and learned the value of calmness. But calmness did not mean weakness. Just as a fisherman waits silently for the right moment to pull the line, Ravi began to plan his response. He returned to his porch and opened an old wooden box that held his papers. Inside were deeds and maps, records that showed clearly where his property ended. He spread them on the table and smiled as he traced the outline with his finger. The lake was not a community lake, as Karen claimed. It was his lake, fully included in his property. The HOA had no power over it. Patience, he whispered to himself, remembering the lessons of his father. A net is not thrown in anger. It is thrown with care. Later that day, Ravi walked through the neighborhood. People greeted him warmly. Children waved as they played on their bicycles. Mrs. Mira from 2 houses down offered him some bread she had baked. Ravi accepted with thanks, and they spoke for a few minutes. It did not take long for the story of yesterday to come up. "Ravi-ji, I saw the police," she said softly. "Karen called them, didn't she?" Ravi nodded gently. "Yes, she did. But it will be all right." Mira frowned. "She makes rules for everyone, but she never listens. Last week she told my son that his football was too noisy. Imagine that, telling children not to play in their own yard. Others in the neighborhood felt the same. Many had small complaints about Karen. She liked to show her power, but few people liked her attitude. Ravi listened carefully. The more he heard, the more he realized that Karen had built a wall between herself and the people she was supposed to lead. That evening, as Ravi sat on his porch again, he saw Karen watering her plants across the street. She looked proud as always, her back straight and her chin high. Ravi studied her with calm eyes. He knew she expected him to give up. She believed the lake was under her control now, but she did not understand who she was dealing with. The next day, Ravi visited the town office. He spoke kindly to the clerk and requested copies of his property documents. The young man behind the desk smiled. "Of course, sir. Your land records are very clear." He handed Ravi the official papers with seals and stamps. Ravi thanked him and walked home slowly, carrying the papers with care. These documents were more powerful than any words. They were proof, undeniable and strong. That night, Ravi sat with his grandchildren who had come to visit. They listened with wide eyes as he told them what had happened. "Grandpa, why did that lady call the police?" one of them asked. "Because some people like rules more than kindness," Ravi said gently. "But remember this, the truth always waits. It does not run. And when the truth arrives, it cannot be stopped." The children nodded, though they did not fully understand. To them, Grandpa was always wise and his words always carried a lesson. Days passed. Ravi did not fish at the lake, not yet. He waited, letting the silence grow. Karen grew confident. She told neighbors proudly that she had stopped him. She spoke loudly at meetings about how rules must be followed. She even looked at Ravi's porch sometimes with a small smile of victory, but Ravi was not worried. He was preparing. 1 week later, the HOA held its monthly meeting at the community hall. Most of the neighbors attended as usual. Karen stood at the front, speaking about grass length, mailbox colors, and parking spaces. She loved to hear her own voice. Ravi sat quietly in the back, his papers folded neatly in his pocket. He listened patiently until the meeting reached the section where residents could speak. When his turn came, he rose slowly. His steps were steady, his face calm. "Friends," he began, "I would like to speak about the lake." The room grew quiet. People knew about the incident with the police. They turned their eyes toward him, curious. "I have lived here for more than 30 years, Ravi continued. "I have always cared for the lake, cleaned it, and enjoyed fishing there. Recently, I was told I was not allowed to fish, but I would like to share something with you all." He unfolded the papers and held them up. The official stamps glimmered under the lights. "This lake," he said firmly, "is part of my property. It has been in my name since the day I moved here. The HOA has no control over it. I have every right to fish, to sit, and to enjoy the peace of this water." Gasps moved across the room. Some smiled, some nodded. Karen's face turned red. She stood quickly, trying to interrupt. "That is not possible. The lake belongs to the community." Ravi raised his hand gently. "No, Karen, these papers show the truth. Anyone who wants to see them may do so. The lake is mine, and I will continue to fish there as I always have." The neighbors began murmuring. Many of them looked at Karen with disappointment. Some even laughed softly, shaking their heads. One man spoke up. "Ravi has always been peaceful. He never bothered anyone. Why would you call the police on him?" Another added, "If the lake is his, then you had no right to interfere." Karen's pride wavered. She opened her mouth to argue, but the voices around her grew stronger. People were tired of her strictness. They were tired of her rules that ignored kindness. Ravi folded his papers again and placed them back in his pocket. "I am not here to fight," he said. "I only wanted the truth to be known. I will fish at my lake tomorrow, and anyone who wishes to join me is welcome. You do not need to fear rules that do not exist." The meeting ended with Karen silent and embarrassed. Neighbors gathered around Ravi, thanking him for standing up calmly and showing the truth. For the first time in a long while, they felt lighter. The next morning, Ravi returned to his spot at the lake. The sun rose golden over the water. He set down his chair, cast his line, and breathed deeply. Birds sang, and the ripples of the lake welcomed him back. One by one, neighbors came. Children sat by the water, tossing stones. Adults brought tea and snacks. They watched Ravi fish, cheering softly when he caught a small silver fish. The lake, once silent, was now full of life and laughter. Karen stood at her window, watching. Her lips were tight, her hands clenched. She could do nothing. The papers were clear. The neighbors had seen them, and the truth was on Ravi's side. As Ravi reeled in another fish, he smiled. His revenge was not angry. It was patient, calm, and sweet. Karen had tried to take his peace, but instead, she had given him the chance to bring the whole neighborhood together. The lake was no longer just his place of quiet. It was now a place of community, of joy, and of truth. And Grandpa Ravi knew that patience had once again proven stronger than pride. The sun rose higher each day, and with it, the energy around the little lake behind Grandpa Ravi's home began to change. What had once been a quiet spot where only Ravi sat with his fishing rod was slowly turning into something greater. The neighbors, who once kept to themselves, now found reasons to come by. Children played near the water, their laughter carrying through the air. Families brought picnic baskets, spreading blankets on the grass. For the first time in years, the lake became the heart of the neighborhood. Grandpa Ravi never asked anyone to join him. He never gave speeches or sent invitations. Yet people came. They came because his calmness had given them courage. They came because his gentle stand against Karen reminded them that kindness mattered more than strict rules. And they came because the lake itself seemed to invite them, its calm ripples reflecting the spirit of peace that Ravi carried within him. On one warm afternoon, Little Arav and his sister Pooja ran down to the lake holding homemade kites. Their father, Raj, followed with a basket of food. Nearby, Mira spread a blanket and handed out slices of fresh bread. Neighbors sat in small groups chatting and smiling. Ravi cast his line into the water as he always did, his old straw hat shading his eyes. Every now and then a cheer went up when he pulled in a fish. "Grandpa Ravi, can I try?" Arav asked, his eyes wide with excitement. Ravi smiled and handed him the rod. "Hold it steady. Fishing is not about pulling hard, it is about waiting patiently." The boy nodded seriously, imitating Ravi's calm posture. When the line tugged, his face lit up. With Ravi's gentle guidance, he pulled in a small fish. The crowd clapped and Arav grinned proudly. Moments like this brought joy to everyone. They reminded the neighbors of simple happiness, of the strength of patience and togetherness. But Karen, from her house across the street, watched with growing frustration. Each day she peered through her window blinds. She saw children running, adults laughing, and families gathering by the lake. What irritated her most was the way people looked at Ravi, with respect, warmth, and admiration. She had wanted to make him an example of rule-breaking. Instead, he had become the center of the neighborhood. Karen could not bear it. She felt her authority slipping. She began pacing in her living room, muttering about order and discipline. She pulled out the HOA handbook, flipping through its pages. But nowhere did it mention Ravi's lake. It was his private property. She had no power there. Yet Karen was not the kind of person to let go easily. She decided she would find another way to show her control. The next day, she walked over to the edge of the crowd at the lake. Her face was tight, her smile forced. Some neighbors glanced at her but did not invite her to join. She cleared her throat loudly. "This is becoming a disturbance," she announced. "Too much noise, too much activity. This is not what our neighborhood is supposed to look like." The neighbors looked at her in silence. Raj spoke first, his voice calm but firm. "Karen, we are just sitting by the lake, enjoying the afternoon. The children are playing and Ravi is fishing." "How is that a disturbance?" Karen's eyes narrowed. "There are rules about gatherings. You cannot just turn this place into a festival." Ravi lifted his head slowly, his gentle voice carrying more weight than loudness ever could. "Karen, this lake belongs to me. The people here are my guests. They come peacefully, they respect the place, and they bring joy. If you see disturbance, perhaps it is in your own heart, not in this lake." The words were simple, but they struck deep. A murmur spread through the crowd. People nodded in agreement. Karen's cheeks flushed red. Without another word, she turned sharply and walked back to her house. After she left, the mood grew lighter. The neighbors laughed softly, and someone strummed a guitar. Ravi continued fishing, his face calm as ever. But inside, he knew Karen would not give up so easily. She had lost face in front of everyone, and her pride would push her to try again. That evening, as the stars appeared, Ravi sat with Raj and Mira on his porch. They drank tea together, watching the lake shimmer under the moonlight. "Karen will try something else," Raj said. "She does not like losing control." Ravi nodded. "Yes, but we must remember this. Anger burns fast, but patience lasts long. If she chooses anger, she will tire. If we choose patience, we will win." Mira smiled. "You have a way of making things sound simple, Ravi-ji. But you are right. Already the whole neighborhood feels closer. She cannot take that away." The next morning, Karen tried a new plan. She contacted the town office, complaining about public gatherings causing noise and litter. Officials came to inspect. But when they arrived, they found the place clean, calm, and full of respectful families. Children picked up their trash, adults spoke in soft tones, and Ravi himself made sure the area stayed neat. The officials could not find a single problem. They left impressed, even smiling at Ravi's kindness. Karen's frustration grew heavier. She began to feel the neighborhood slipping out of her hands. Every rule she tried to enforce seemed smaller compared to the spirit of togetherness that Ravi had created. One afternoon, when Ravi was sitting quietly at the lake, Karen marched across the street again. She stopped right in front of him. "Why do you keep doing this?" she demanded. "Why do you encourage people to gather here? You are ruining the order of this neighborhood." Ravi looked at her calmly. His voice was soft but firm. "I do not encourage anyone. They come because they find peace here. Peace cannot be forced. It cannot be ordered. It can only be shared." Karen's eyes burned with frustration. She wanted to argue, but the truth of his words weighed heavily. Around them, children laughed and families smiled. Karen realized she was the only one standing apart. the only one without joy. That night, Ravi thought deeply. He did not want to defeat Karen. He wanted her to see that peace was greater than pride. He wished she could sit by the lake, feel the breeze, and understand the calmness that fishing brought. But he knew she would not change easily. Pride is a heavy stone to carry, and Karen carried it with both hands. As the days passed, the gatherings grew even larger. Neighbors brought food to share, stories to tell, and songs to sing. Ravi became a quiet symbol of unity. He never raised his voice, never argued, never demanded anything. Yet by doing so little, he had done so much. Karen, on the other hand, grew more restless. Her house, once her pride, now felt like a prison of her own rules. The laughter from the lake reached her windows, reminding her that she was on the outside. One evening, as the sun set in fiery colors across the lake, Ravi caught a large fish. The crowd cheered. He held it up for the children to see before gently releasing it back into the water. The moment was pure, simple, and full of meaning. Karen watched from her window, her heart filled with conflict. She wanted to shout, to stop it, to take back her control. But a small voice inside whispered something she did not want to hear, that maybe she was wrong, and maybe the old man was right. Ravi did not know it yet, but his patience was slowly working on her heart. Just as water shaped stone over time, his calmness was beginning to touch even Karen's stubborn pride. The lake, once silent, had become a place of unity. And in that unity, something greater was happening. It was not only about fishing anymore. It was about neighbors becoming friends, about children finding joy, about families sharing peace. And perhaps if patience held strong, even Karen would one day join them. The days around the lake continued to bloom like a garden in spring. Every morning, Grandpa Ravi carried his chair and his fishing rod down to the water. He cast his line with calm patience, never hurrying, never forcing, simply waiting. Around him, the neighborhood came alive. Children skipped stones, families spread out picnic baskets, and elders sat together sharing stories. What had once been a quiet lake for one man had become a gathering place for many hearts. Ravi never asked for this change. He had only wanted his peace, but peace has a way of spreading. Like ripples on the water, his calm spirit touched those around him. People who barely spoke to one another before now greeted each other warmly. Strangers became friends, and friends felt like family. But across the street, Karen could not rest. Each day she sat by her window watching the laughter by the lake. Her heart grew heavy with bitterness. She had tried rules. She had tried authority. She had even tried the police. None of it had worked. Instead of stopping Ravi, she had made him the center of the neighborhood's joy. The more people gathered by the lake, the more Karen felt left out. Inside her house, she walked back and forth, thinking of ways to regain control. She made lists, wrote letters, and flipped through the HOA rulebook again and again. Yet each time she found nothing that could stop him. The lake was his property. The gatherings were peaceful. No law was broken, no rule violated. One evening she stood at her window watching as lanterns glowed softly by the water. Families had brought food to share. Laughter filled the air. Children chased each other in circles, their shadows dancing on the grass. And at the center of it all sat Ravi, calm and gentle, smiling at everyone as though they were his own family. For the first time, Karen felt something other than anger. She felt a quiet ache, a sense that she was missing something precious. She told herself it was nonsense, that rules mattered more than laughter, but her heart disagreed. Deep down, she longed to be part of it, even if she would not admit it aloud. The next morning, Ravi walked slowly around the neighborhood as he often did. He stopped to greet people, to listen to their small stories, to admire gardens and pets. When he passed Karen's house, he noticed her outside watering her plants. She avoided his eyes, but he paused anyway. "Good morning, Karen," he said kindly. His tone was gentle, without anger or pride. She looked at him briefly, then back at her flowers. "Good morning," she replied, her voice cool. Ravi smiled softly. "The roses are looking healthy. You must care for them very well." Karen did not reply, but his words lingered in her mind long after he had walked away. No one else had spoken to her kindly in weeks. She realized that while she had been busy trying to control others, she had cut herself off from the kindness of her neighbors. That evening, Ravi sat on his porch sipping tea. The lake shimmered in the fading light. Raj came by with his children carrying a basket of fruits. Mira soon joined them, bringing her fresh bread. As they laughed together, Ravi noticed Karen's curtains shift slightly. She was watching again. He leaned closer to Raj and Mira. "She is not our enemy," he said softly. "She is only lost. Pride is a heavy burden and it blinds the heart. But even a blinded heart can find light if we do not close the door." The next day, Ravi had an idea. When families gathered at the lake again, he caught a fish and handed it to Arav. "The little boy who often fished with him, Arav," he said. "Take this fish to Karen. Tell her it is a gift from the lake." The boy looked surprised but nodded eagerly. He ran across the street and knocked on Karen's door. She opened it, frowning at first, but her expression softened when she saw the child holding the fish with both hands. "Grandpa Ravi says this is for you," Arav said simply. Karen blinked, uncertain what to say. For a moment she thought of refusing, but the innocence in the boy's eyes melted her pride. She accepted the fish quietly. "Thank you," she whispered, though her voice trembled. That night Karen cooked the fish for herself. As she ate, she thought of the boy's bright smile, of Ravi's calm eyes, and of the laughter by the lake. The food tasted different from any meal she had made before. It carried warmth that came not from spices but from kindness. The next weekend, Ravi prepared a small gathering by the lake. He brought out extra chairs and asked his neighbors to bring dishes to share. Soon the grassy banks were filled with food, music, and stories. People laughed, children played, and lanterns floated on the water. Ravi noticed Karen watching from her window again. This time he raised his hand and waved gently. To everyone's surprise, she hesitated, then slowly stepped outside. She walked across the street, her posture stiff, her face uncertain. The crowd fell quiet for a moment as she approached. Everyone waited to see what she would do. Ravi stood smiling warmly. "Welcome, Karen," he said. "Please join us." Karen looked around at the faces of her neighbors. Some were cautious, some were curious, but none were unkind. She felt her pride battling with a strange longing in her chest. After a long pause, she sat down in one of the empty chairs. The crowd relaxed. Raj offered her some fruit and Mira passed her a piece of bread. Karen accepted, though awkwardly. Slowly the conversations resumed, the laughter returned, and the night carried on. Karen did not laugh, not yet. But she listened. She heard the children's giggles, the soft strumming of a guitar, the gentle words exchanged between friends. For the first time, she felt what it was like to be part of the circle rather than standing outside of it. As the evening ended, Karen rose quietly and returned home. She did not speak much, but in her heart, something had shifted. The walls she had built around herself had cracked just a little, enough to let in the sound of laughter and the warmth of kindness. Ravi sat by the lake after everyone had left, looking at the moon's reflection in the water. He knew patience was working. Just as water shapes stone over time, kindness was shaping Karen's heart. She was still proud, still resistant, but she had taken her first step. He whispered to the lake, "The sweetest victories are not won by force. They are won by waiting, by kindness, and by truth." The water rippled softly as if agreeing with him, and so, the lake that had once been the cause of conflict was slowly becoming the bridge to something greater. Not only had it united the neighbors, but it was beginning to heal the loneliest heart in the neighborhood. The turning point had come. The story was not finished, but its direction had changed. Where once there had been division, now there was hope. The morning air was cool and gentle when Grandpa Ravi stepped out of his house. The lake shimmered in the soft light, and the trees along its edge swayed lightly as though bowing to the breeze. He carried his old fishing rod and folding chair as always, and placed them at his usual spot by the water. But this morning felt different. There was a sense of anticipation in the air. The neighborhood had grown used to gathering by the lake, yet today seemed brighter, fuller, as though the place itself knew something important was about to happen. Ravi cast his line into the water and leaned back in his chair. His straw hat shaded his eyes and his mind drifted peacefully. Soon he heard footsteps on the grass. When he looked up, he saw Raj arriving with his children Arav and Pooja. They ran ahead, waving to Ravi. "Grandpa, are we fishing today?" Arav asked eagerly. "Yes, my boy," Ravi replied with a smile. "The fish are waiting for us." More neighbors arrived one by one. Mira carried a basket of bread, others brought fruit, and some carried blankets. Before long, the lakeside was alive with voices and laughter. Karen, however, stood at her window across the street. She had watched the gatherings grow, watched her neighbors become closer, and watched her own distance from them deepen. For weeks she had struggled with her pride. Yet each time she saw the warmth by the lake, something in her heart softened a little more. Finally, she made a decision. She dressed simply, combed her hair, and stepped outside. As she walked toward the lake, her steps were slow and uncertain. The children noticed her first and grew quiet. Soon the entire crowd turned to watch her approach. Ravi rose from his chair, smiling warmly. "Welcome, Karen," he said in his calm voice. "We are glad you are here." Karen hesitated, her pride fighting against the kindness in his words. Then she nodded and took a seat on one of the empty chairs. The crowd relaxed and conversation resumed. Raj offered her a piece of fruit and Meera passed her bread. She accepted both quietly, her hands trembling slightly. For a while, she only listened. She listened to the laughter of children skipping stones. She listened to the neighbors sharing stories. She listened to the soft plucking of a guitar. Slowly, her stiff posture began to ease. For the first time in many years, she felt a sense of belonging. As the day went on, Ravi handed her his fishing rod. "Would you like to try?" he asked kindly. Karen looked startled. "Me? I have never fished before." "Then today is a good day to begin," Ravi said with a gentle smile. The crowd watched with interest as Karen held the rod awkwardly. Ravi guided her hands. "Hold it steady. Fishing is about patience, not force. You must wait, listen, and let the water speak to you." Minutes passed in silence. Karen frowned, unsure if she was doing it right. But then the line tugged. She gasped, pulling quickly, and with Ravi's steady guidance, she lifted a small silver fish from the water. The crowd cheered. A smile spread across Karen's face before she could stop it. For a moment, her pride melted completely, replaced by the simple joy of the catch. She handed the rod back to Ravi, her cheeks glowing with surprise. I did it," she whispered. "Yes," Ravi said softly. "You see? Patience rewards those who wait." The neighbors clapped and the children cheered. For the first time, Karen felt accepted, not as the head of the HOA, not as the strict enforcer of rules, but simply as a neighbor, a person among others. From that day forward, Karen began to change. Slowly, gently, like ice melting under the sun, her coldness faded. She started greeting neighbors when she saw them. She smiled, though shyly at first. She even apologized quietly to a few people she had once scolded for small things. One evening, she knocked on Ravi's door. When he opened it, she stood nervously, holding a basket of flowers from her garden. "I wanted to say thank you," she said, "for not shutting me out. For giving me a chance." Ravi smiled and accepted the flowers. "Everyone deserves a chance, Karen. Sometimes we only need patience to see it." The weeks that followed brought even more unity to the neighborhood. The lake became a symbol of peace and friendship. Families continued to gather, children continued to play, and neighbors continued to share meals and stories. Karen no longer watched from her window. She sat among them, sometimes fishing with Ravi, sometimes simply listening. She was not the loudest voice anymore. She did not try to control everything. Instead, she learned to enjoy the simple moments she had once overlooked. The sweetest victory for Ravi was not proving Karen wrong. It was not showing her the documents that gave him ownership of the lake. It was not even the laughter of the neighbors who supported him. The sweetest victory was seeing Karen soften, seeing her pride give way to kindness, and seeing the entire neighborhood grow closer together. One evening, as the sun set over the lake, painting the sky in gold and orange, Ravi sat surrounded by his neighbors. Children played, adults shared food, and music filled the air. Karen sat quietly beside him, holding a fishing rod with a patient smile. Ravi looked around at the faces glowing in the warm light. He felt the peace of the lake, the joy of the people, and the harmony that had grown out of patience. He thought of his father's words, spoken long ago when he was just a boy learning to fish. "The world will test you with storms, but patience will always bring you back to calm waters." Now, as an old man, he understood those words more deeply than ever. The storm had come in the form of anger, pride, and conflict. But through patience, calmness, and kindness, he had not only protected his peace but also transformed the hearts of those around him. The lake rippled gently, as though agreeing with him. The neighborhood was no longer divided by rules or pride. It was united by laughter, kindness, and the calm presence of an old man who loved to fish. And so the story that began with anger and police cars ended with peace and friendship. The sweet revenge Ravi had wanted was never about hurting Karen. It was about showing her, and everyone else, that patience is stronger than pride, and kindness lasts longer than control. That night, as the stars appeared above the lake, Ravi closed his eyes for a moment. He felt the cool breeze on his face and the warmth of friendship around him. He knew his father's lesson was true. Patience always wins. The neighborhood by the lake would never be the same again. And for Grandpa Ravi, that was the sweetest victory of all.